I found the journal 3 days before I should have died. It was sitting on the metal desk in the control room, pages yellowed and brittle, filled with entries that described exactly what would happen to me. The handwriting matched my own, but the date on the last entry was from 6 months in the future, and it ended mid-sentence with a single word: watching. My name is Austin, and I am 28 years old. I work as an environmental data analyst for a private research firm based out of Portland, Oregon. Or at least, I used to. After what happened in the Amazon, I am not sure I can ever go back to any kind of normal work again. This is not a story about discovery or adventure. This is a warning about places that should remain forgotten, and about the things that wait in the spaces between what we understand and what we refuse to believe. Before I tell you what happened, I want to know if anyone else has experienced something like this. Have you ever felt like you were being watched by something that was not quite there? Something that existed just outside your field of vision? Drop a comment below and let me know. I need to know I am not losing my mind. It started in late August when my supervisor, a stern woman named Dr. Patricia Holloway, called me into her office on a Friday afternoon. The Portland rain hammered against the windows of our downtown office building, and she looked more tired than I had ever seen her. She slid a manila folder across her desk toward me without any preamble. "Austin, I need you to do something for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I need you to not ask too many questions." Inside the folder were satellite images of dense jungle canopy, coordinates, and a brief description of a research station that had been abandoned nearly 15 years ago. The station, designated as Outpost Viridian, had been established by our company in partnership with the Brazilian government to study medicinal plants and document biodiversity in a remote section of the Amazon rainforest, about 200 miles northwest of Manaus. "Why was it abandoned?" I asked, spreading the documents across her desk. Dr. Holloway hesitated. "Equipment failures, communication breakdowns. The official report said it was too expensive to maintain that far into the interior. And unofficially," she met my eyes, "the last research team reported strange anomalies, equipment working in reverse, time discrepancies in their daily logs. They requested an emergency extraction and never spoke about what they experienced. The company sealed the records. So why send me back there? Because something is still transmitting from that station," she said. 3 weeks ago, our satellite array picked up a signal. Data packets. Environmental readings. Someone or something turned the equipment back on. I should have said no right then. I should have walked out of that office and never looked back. But I was young and ambitious, and the pay she offered for a 2-week solo expedition was enough to clear my student loans and then some. I told her I would do it. 1 week later, I was on a plane to Brazil. The journey to Outpost Viridian took 3 days. I flew into Manaus, spent a night in a hotel that smelled like mildew and disinfectant, and then boarded a small charter plane that took me deeper into the jungle. The pilot, a weathered Brazilian man named Carlos, did not speak much English, but he made his feelings clear when I showed him the coordinates. "No é bom," he muttered, shaking his head. "Not good." "Why not good?" I pressed. He just tapped his temple and made a circling motion with his finger. "Crazy." "Great." Carlos dropped me at a clearing beside a muddy river where a local guide was supposed to meet me. But when the plane took off, disappearing into the gray sky, I was alone. I waited for 2 hours, swatting at mosquitoes and watching the tree line, before I realized no one was coming. I had a satellite phone, a GPS unit, a machete, and enough supplies for 3 weeks. The coordinates placed Outpost Viridian about 8 miles northeast through primary rainforest. I could wait and hope the guide eventually showed up, or I could start walking. The humidity was suffocating, and storm clouds were building on the horizon. I started walking. The jungle swallowed me within minutes. The canopy overhead was so dense that the light took on a greenish quality, filtered through thousands of layers of leaves. Everything dripped with moisture. The sound was overwhelming at first, a constant cacophony of bird calls, insect chirps, and the rustle of unseen animals moving through the undergrowth. But after a few hours of hacking through vines and climbing over fallen logs, I started to notice something strange. The sounds were always ahead of me or behind me, never beside me. It was as if the jungle was parting around me, creating a corridor of silence that moved with me through the trees. I told myself it was just my imagination, a trick of acoustics in the dense vegetation, but the feeling of being observed grew stronger with each step. Not the casual observation of animals watching a strange creature pass through their territory. This was focused, intentional, hungry. I made camp that first night beside a stream, setting up my small tent and starting a fire that seemed reluctant to catch in the damp air. I ate a cold meal from a military ration pack and checked my GPS. I had covered maybe 4 miles. At this rate, it would take me another day to reach the station. As darkness fell, the jungle sounds changed. The daytime chorus gave way to the calls of night birds and the chirping of frogs. But underneath it all, I heard something else. A low humming sound, almost below the threshold of hearing, that made my teeth ache and my stomach turn. I could not locate the direction it was coming from. It seemed to emanate from the jungle itself. I barely slept that night. Every time I started to drift off, I would jolt awake with the sensation that something was standing just outside my tent. Once, around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps circling my campsite. Slow, deliberate footsteps that crunched on fallen leaves and snapped small branches. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent, sweeping the beam across the clearing. Nothing. But in the mud beside the stream, I found tracks. They were roughly human-sized, but wrong. The toes were too long, splayed out like fingers, and the heel barely made an impression, as if whatever left them walked on the balls of its feet, or as if it barely had any weight at all. I did not sleep again that night. I sat with my back against a tree, the machete across my lap, watching the darkness between the trees and listening to that low, persistent hum that never quite went away. At first light, I packed up camp and started moving again. The jungle seemed darker than it had the day before, even though the sun was rising. The green light filtering through the canopy had taken on a sickly quality, and the air tasted metallic, like licking a battery. Around 10 a.m., I found the first sign that I was heading in the right direction. A trail marker, faded and overgrown, with an arrow pointing northeast and the words OV 3-2 stenciled on it. Outpost Viridian, 3.2 miles. I was close. The trail markers appeared every quarter mile after that, each one more deteriorated than the last. Some had been vandalized, the arrows turned backward or the distance numbers scratched out and replaced with warnings in Portuguese that I could not fully understand. One simply said, Volta, which I knew meant turn back. I should have listened. I reached Outpost Viridian just after 2 p.m. on the second day. The research station sat in a clearing that had been hacked out of the jungle, though the forest was slowly reclaiming it. Vines crawled up the sides of the 3 prefabricated buildings, and the satellite dish on the roof of the main structure was thick with moss. A chain-link fence surrounded the compound, but the gate hung open, swaying slightly in a breeze I could not feel. The place looked completely dead. No lights, no sound except the ever-present hum of the jungle, and yet, as I stood at the gate looking in, I could see a faint glow coming from the windows of the main building. Not bright, just a soft blue luminescence, like a computer screen left running in an empty room. Someone or something had turned the equipment back on. I keyed my satellite phone and tried to call Dr. Holloway. Static. I checked the signal indicator. Full bars. But when I tried the call again, all I got was a high-pitched whine that made my ears ring. I shut the phone off and approached the gate. The compound consisted of 3 buildings arranged in a triangle around a central courtyard that had once been gravel but was now mostly mud and weeds. The main building, marked with a faded sign reading Operations, was the largest. To the left was a smaller structure labeled Residential, and to the right was what looked like a laboratory or storage facility. The blue glow was definitely coming from the Operations building. I crossed the courtyard, my boots squelching in the mud, and tried the door. It was unlocked. The handle turned easily, and the door swung inward with a long creak that echoed through the empty compound. The interior was a time capsule. Papers still sat on desks, coffee mugs were scattered around a small break room, and a coat hung on a hook by the door as if someone had just stepped out for a moment. But everything was covered in a fine layer of dust and mold, and the air smelled like rot and chemicals. The blue glow was coming from the control room at the back of the building. I followed it down a narrow hallway lined with offices and storage rooms, each one frozen in the moment of abandonment. In one office, a calendar on the wall was turned to November 2009. The last day marked was the 17th, circled in red pen with the words, "Extraction Day," written underneath. But something was wrong with the calendar. Someone had come back later and added more days, continuing into December, January, February. The handwriting got shakier and more desperate as the months went on. The last entry was dated July 2010, 8 months after the official abandonment. It just said, "Still here, still watching, cannot leave." The control room door was ajar, and the blue light spilled out into the hallway. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was lined with computer terminals, weather monitoring equipment, and radio gear. Most of it looked dead, covered in corrosion and fungal growth. But one terminal was active, its screen displaying scrolling lines of data that I did not immediately recognize. Environmental readings, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, timestamps. That is when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The timestamps on the data were wrong. The terminal said it was 11:47 p.m., but my watch showed 2:31 p.m. I checked my GPS unit, 2:31 p.m. I moved closer to the terminal and saw that there were other files open. Logs, hundreds of them, dated over the past 15 years. I opened the most recent one, dated that same day, and started reading. It was a research log, written in English, describing observations of temporal anomalies and localized reality distortions centered around the research station. The writer noted that electronic equipment frequently displayed incorrect times, that shadows sometimes moved independent of their light sources, and that team members reported seeing duplicates of themselves in reflections and photographs. The log ended with a note. "If you are reading this, you have already been marked. It will not let you leave. I am so sorry." I stumbled back from the terminal, my heart hammering. This had to be some kind of prank. Maybe kids from a local village had come up here and messed with the equipment, loaded fake files onto the system. But who would maintain a prank for 15 years in the middle of nowhere? That is when I saw the journal on the desk beside the terminal. A standard black composition notebook, the kind you could buy at any office supply store. It sat in a patch of dust-free space, as if it had been placed there recently. I picked it up and opened to the first page. The handwriting was mine. I am not talking about similar handwriting. I mean, it was exactly my handwriting, down to the way I make my capital A's and the little flourish on my Y's. The first entry was dated September 3rd, 6 months in the future, from when I was standing there. Day 178, it read. "I have stopped trying to count the loops. Every time I think I understand the pattern, it changes. The thing in the jungle knows I am trying to escape. It watches me through the trees, through the windows, through my own reflection. I can feel its attention like weight pressing down on my skull. Today I found my own body in the laboratory building. It had been there a long time. I do not know which version of me that was. I do not know which version I am." My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. The entries described failed escape attempts, conversations with versions of myself from different times, and increasingly desperate theories about what was happening. The final entry, on the last page, was incomplete. Day 286. I understand now. The station is not in the jungle. The jungle is in the station. We built on top of something old, something that does not follow our rules. It creates loops, variations, echoes. I have seen myself arrive hundreds of times. I have watched myself make the same choices over and over. But this time is different. This time, I am going to... The sentence ended there, trailing off into a smear of ink, as if the pen had been dragged across the page. Below it, in letters so hard-pressed they had torn through the paper, was a single word: watching. I dropped the journal like it had burned me. This was impossible. I had just arrived. I had not been here for 286 days. This had to be fake. Had to be. The lights in the control room flickered. Once, twice, then they went out completely, leaving me in darkness broken only by the blue glow of the terminal screen. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicked it on, and swept the beam around the room. In the corner, Where there had definitely been nothing a moment before, stood a figure. It was human-shaped, but wrong in ways my brain struggled to process. Its proportions were off, arms too long, head tilted at an angle that should have broken its neck. It wore clothes that might have been a research uniform once, but they hung on its frame like wet rags. The worst part was its face, or rather, the absence of one. Where there should have been features, there was just smooth, dark skin, stretched over skull contours, with 2 deep indentations where eyes should have been. Those indentations pointed directly at me. I ran. I did not think, did not try to process what I was seeing. I just ran, back through the hallway, past the offices with their frozen moments of normalcy, through the main entrance, and out into the courtyard. The humidity hit me like a wall, and I sucked in great gasping breaths of the thick jungle air. Behind me, the operations building stood silent. No movement in the windows, no sound of pursuit, but I could feel it watching me from inside, could feel the weight of its attention like fingers pressing against the back of my skull. If you are still watching this, if you have made it this far in the story, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I know it seems like an odd thing to ask in the middle of this nightmare, but I need to know people are hearing this. I need to know someone will remember if I do not make it out. And share this with anyone who might understand what I went through. Please, I needed shelter, somewhere to think and figure out what to do next. The residential building seemed like the best option. It was smaller, easier to secure, and hopefully whatever that thing was, it would stay in the operations center. The residential building was laid out like a small dormitory, a common area with a kitchenette and some ratty furniture, a bathroom with a rust-stained shower, and 4 small bedrooms branching off a central hallway. I chose the room at the far end, farthest from the door, and barricaded it with the bed frame and a heavy wooden dresser. Then I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and tried to make sense of what was happening. The rational part of my brain, the part that had spent 4 years in college and 3 years working as a data analyst, insisted there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I had been drugged. Maybe there was some kind of chemical in the water or the air that caused hallucinations. Maybe I was having a breakdown and none of this was real. But the journal had been real. The handwriting had been mine. And the figure in the control room, whatever it was, had been solid enough to block the light from the terminal screen. I checked my watch. 3:15 p.m. I had been in the compound for just over an hour. If I left now, pushed hard, I could make it back to the river clearing by nightfall. I could activate the emergency beacon on my satellite phone and wait for extraction. Dr. Holloway would send someone. She had to, but something stopped me. A nagging feeling that I had forgotten something important. I pulled out the journal again, the one with my handwriting, and flipped back to an entry about halfway through. Day 84. Tried to leave again today. Made it 3 miles down the trail before I found myself back at the gate. The jungle will not let me go. Every path leads back here. I think it has something to do with the transmission. As long as the equipment is running, as long as the data is flowing, the loop remains active. Tomorrow, I am going to try shutting down the main terminal. The next entry was dated 2 days later. Day 86. I cannot shut it down. Every time I pull the plug, cut the wires, smash the screen, I black out and wake up back in my room. The terminal is always running again when I check. I do not think the equipment is the cause anymore. I think it is the symptom. Something here wants to be observed. It needs to be witnessed. That is why it keeps us here. We are its audience. I closed the journal and stared at the ceiling. The smart thing to do was leave. Forget the mission, forget the data. Just get out while I still could. But what if the journal was right? What if every trail really did lead back here? There was only one way to find out. I unpacked my gear, did a quick inventory of supplies, and prepared to spend the night. If I was going to be trapped here, I needed to understand the rules, and rules meant observation, documentation, data. I could do data. As evening approached, the jungle sounds changed again. The hum I had heard the previous night returned, deeper and more resonant now that I was inside the compound. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the walls and floor of the building. I tried to measure it with a decibel meter app on my satellite phone, but the device kept crashing whenever I pointed it toward the sound. At 6:47 p.m., the lights in the residential building flickered on by themselves. Old fluorescent tubes buzzed to life in the common area and hallway, casting everything in harsh white light. I had not touched any switches. There was no generator running that I could hear, but the lights worked anyway. I ventured out of my barricaded room to investigate. The common area looked even more depressing in the artificial light. All stained linoleum and peeling wallpaper. Someone had left a newspaper on the coffee table, folded open to the weather page. The date was November 16th, 2009, the day before the extraction. But when I looked closer, I saw that there were notations written in the margins, dozens of them, in different handwriting, different colors of ink. They were all dates and times. Arrived 2:31 p.m., Austin. Arrived 2:31 p.m., Austin. Arrived 2:31 p.m., Austin. The same note, repeated at least 30 times. My name, my arrival time, written by different versions of me over and over again. My throat went dry. I grabbed a pen from my pack and added my own entry. Arrived 2:31 p.m., Austin, September 2nd. I dated it, signed it, and stared at the page. How many times had I done this? How many versions of me had stood in this exact spot, holding this exact pen, writing this exact message? Something moved in my peripheral vision. I spun around, but the common area was empty. Then I noticed the mirrors. There were two of them, one on the wall beside the kitchenette and another hanging above a small table. My reflection stared back at me from both, except the reflection in the kitchenette mirror was not quite right. It was me, wearing my clothes, with my face, but it was not moving in sync. When I raised my right hand, the reflection raised its left, a fraction of a second too late. When I turned my head, the reflection followed with a slight delay, like a video with lag. And it was smiling. Not a big smile, just a tiny upturn at the corners of the mouth that I was definitely not making. I backed toward my room, keeping both mirrors in sight. The reflection in the mirror above the table moved normally, perfectly synchronized with my movements. But the one in the kitchenette continued to lag, continued to smile that small, wrong smile. As I reached the doorway to the hallway, the lagging reflection lifted one hand and waved at me, slowly, deliberately. I ran back to my room, slammed the door, and shoved the dresser back against it. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, flashlight gripped in one hand and machete in the other, and waited for morning. The hours crawled by. I heard sounds throughout the night. Footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Whispers that might have been the wind, or might have been voices. At 11:34 p.m., someone knocked on my door. 3 slow, heavy knocks that shook the frame. I did not answer. The knocking came again at 1:15 a.m., and again at 2:47 a.m. Each time, 3 slow knocks. Never more, never less. Always the same rhythm. At 4:23 a.m., I heard my own voice in the hallway. It was calling my name. Austin, are you in there? I need help. Please, I am hurt. It sounded exactly like me. Same pitch, same cadence, same slight Oregon accent. But I was in the room. I was sitting right here, which meant whatever was in the hallway wearing my voice was not me. Austin, please. It got me. There is blood everywhere. I cannot walk. Please open the door. The voice got more desperate, more panicked. It begged and pleaded and cried. It described wounds in vivid detail, told stories about being attacked in the laboratory building, about finding something terrible in the basement that I did not know existed. I clamped my hands over my ears and hummed loudly, trying to drown it out. Eventually, maybe an hour later, the voice stopped. The hallway went quiet except for that constant, low hum that permeated everything. I must have dozed off around dawn because I woke to sunlight streaming through the grimy window of the bedroom. My watch said 7:52 a.m. I felt like I had been hit by a truck, every muscle sore and stiff from sleeping on the floor with my back against the wall. The compound was quiet. I listened for several minutes before I worked up the courage to move the dresser and open the door. The hallway was empty. Morning light filled the common area, making everything look mundane and non-threatening. The mirrors reflected normal things. The newspaper still sat on the coffee table with my notation added to the list. I needed water, and my supplies were running low. The kitchenette faucet produced a brown trickle when I turned it on, clearly not safe to drink, which meant I needed to check the laboratory building. Research stations like this always had stored water for emergencies. The walk across the courtyard felt like miles. The morning sun beat down on the compound, and the jungle pressed close against the chain-link fence, a wall of green waiting to swallow everything. The laboratory building was the only one I had not entered yet, a squat concrete structure with narrow windows and a heavy metal door. The door was locked. I yanked on the handle, but it would not budge. There was a keypad beside it, old and corroded, that presumably would open the electronic lock. But I did not have a code. I was about to give up when I noticed something scratched into the metal door frame. Numbers. Faint but readable. 1117. November 17th. Extraction day. I punched the code into the keypad, not really expecting it to work. The device beeped twice, and the lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. The door swung open, revealing darkness beyond. The laboratory building had no power, not even the phantom electricity that kept the other buildings lit. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The beam swept across tables covered in scientific equipment, microscopes and centrifuges and things I could not identify. Everything was coated in the same mold and decay that plagued the rest of the compound. But it was the smell that hit me first. Something dead. Something rotting. I found the storage room at the back of the building. Cases of bottled water were stacked against one wall, along with boxes of military rations and medical supplies. I grabbed as much as I could carry and turned to leave. That is when I saw the door in the floor. It was set into the concrete, made of metal with a wheel lock like you would find on a ship's bulkhead. There were warning stickers plastered around it, faded and peeling, but I could still make out the words, "Authorized personnel only. Biological hazard. Do not enter without proper safety equipment." The journal had mentioned a basement. The voice in the hallway had mentioned a basement. And now here it was, exactly where it should not be. Research stations in the jungle did not have basements. The water table was too high. The ground too unstable. I should have left it alone. I should have taken my supplies and gone back to the residential building. But I needed to know. I needed to understand what was happening here. I set down my supplies and approached the door. The wheel lock was stiff with corrosion, but I managed to turn it. The locks disengaged with a series of heavy clanks, and the door shifted slightly in its frame. I pulled it open, and a wave of cold, fetid air washed over me. A ladder descended into darkness. I pointed my flashlight down and saw that it dropped about 15 feet to a concrete floor. The space below looked like some kind of storage area or containment cell, but I could not see much from up top. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I started down the ladder. The temperature dropped as I descended, going from the humid heat of the jungle to a clammy cold that made my breath mist. My flashlight beam bounced off concrete walls and metal shelving units. The smell was overpowering down here. Decay and chemicals and something else I could not identify. Something organic and wrong. The basement was larger than I expected, extending beyond the footprint of the building above. It was divided into sections by chain link barriers, creating a series of cells or pens. Most were empty, but some contained equipment, computers, recording devices, cameras on tripods, all pointed at empty space. And in the far corner, behind 3 layers of chain link, I found the bodies. There were 4 of them, in various states of decay. They all wore research uniforms like the figure I had seen in the control room, but these were real people, dead for years, their bodies mummified by the dry, cold air of the basement. They sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle, all facing the same direction, toward a 5th chair that sat empty in the center. I approached slowly, my light sweeping across their faces. I did not recognize the first 3, but the 4th made my blood run cold. It was me, not similar to me. Not a relative or someone who looked like me. It was me, down to the small scar on my left eyebrow from a childhood fall and the tattoo on my right forearm. I was staring at my own corpse, seated in a chair, head tilted back as if looking at something on the ceiling. I stumbled backward, my boot catching on something. I looked down and saw it was another body, this one fresher, lying face down on the concrete. When I rolled it over, I saw my own face again, eyes open and empty. There was another one behind the chain link barrier, and another in the corner, and another slumped against the far wall. I counted 7 bodies in total, all me, all dead, all in different stages of decay, from years old to what looked like days. A sound echoed through the basement, the creak of the ladder. Someone was coming down. I killed my flashlight and pressed myself against the wall, machete held ready. Footsteps on the concrete floor, slow and shuffling. A beam of light swept across the room, passing within inches of where I hid. "I know you are down here," my voice said from the darkness. "I have been down here before. I know where you are hiding." The footsteps came closer. I could see the figure now in the reflected glow of its flashlight. It was me, wearing the same clothes I had on, carrying the same equipment. But its movements were wrong, jerky and stuttering, like a video skipping frames. "We keep trying to leave," it said, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. "But this is where we end up. Every time. I have died down here 4 times now. Or maybe it was 5. I have lost count." It stopped in front of the bodies, the flashlight beam illuminating my corpses one by one. "The thing in the jungle, it does not kill us," the figure continued. "It just watches. We kill ourselves eventually. From fear or hunger or thirst, or just the knowledge that we can never leave. I think you will die down here too. I think I will find your body tomorrow and add it to the collection." The figure turned, and I saw its face fully for the first time. It was my face, but the eyes were wrong. Too wide, too dark, and behind them, I could see something else looking out, something vast and patient and utterly alien. "But do not worry," it said, smiling. "You will be back. You always come back. The loop always continues. The jungle always wins." I did not wait to hear more. I bolted from my hiding spot and ran for the ladder, dropping my flashlight in my panic. Behind me, I heard the thing wearing my face laugh, a sound that started human but descended into something else, something that hurt my ears and made my vision blur. I climbed the ladder faster than I thought possible, hauled myself through the hatch, and slammed it shut. I spun the wheel lock, sealing whatever was down there inside, and then I ran, out of the laboratory building, across the courtyard, past the residential building, straight for the gate. I hit the jungle at a full sprint, crashing through undergrowth and vines, not caring about direction or trails. I just needed to get away from that place, away from the bodies and the thing wearing my face and the terrible truth that I might have been trapped here for longer than I knew. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, and then I collapsed against a tree and gasped for air. When I finally looked up, trying to get my bearings, I saw the trail marker in front of me. OV-18, it read. Outpost Viridian, 1.8 miles. I had run away from the compound. I was sure of it. I had come from the northeast, heading southwest back toward the river. But somehow, I was closer to the station now than when I started. I tried again. I picked a direction using my GPS, marked it carefully, and started walking. I walked for 2 hours, checking my progress every few minutes. The GPS showed me moving steadily away from the station coordinates, heading back toward the river clearing where I had been dropped off. But when I broke through a patch of thick vegetation, I found myself standing at the compound gate, the same gate I had run through. The operations building sat silent in front of me, its blue glow visible in the windows even in full daylight. The journal had been right. Every path led back here. I sank to my knees in the mud of the courtyard and started to laugh. It was either that or scream, and I was not ready to scream yet. Not quite yet. When I finally pulled myself together, the sun was starting to set. I had wasted an entire day trying to escape, and now I was right back where I started, with night approaching and nowhere to go but back into the residential building. I gathered my scattered supplies, forced myself to drink some water and eat a protein bar, and tried to think logically. The loop was real. The temporal anomalies were real. But there had to be a way out. There had to be something I was missing. I went back to the operations building. The door stood open, exactly as I had left it the day before. and the blue glow still emanated from the control room. I forced myself to walk down that hallway again, past the offices and the calendar marked with desperate notes, to the room with the active terminal. The faceless figure was gone, if it had ever really been there, but the terminal still displayed its scrolling data, and the journal still sat on the desk. I picked it up and started reading more carefully this time, looking for details I had missed. One entry stood out. Day 143. I have been reviewing the original research data from before the abandonment. The team was not studying medicinal plants. That was the cover story. They were investigating the ruins. The company knew about them before they even built the station. Everything else was just an excuse to study what is buried under the laboratory building. Ruins. Under the laboratory building. Under the basement where I had found my own corpses. I flipped forward several pages. Day 198. The ruins predate human civilization in this region by thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands. The symbols carved into the walls match nothing in any database. Dr. Chen thinks they were made by something non-human, but that is impossible. Unless the timeline is wrong. Unless everything we think we know about this jungle is wrong. Dr. Chen. There was that name, but my supervisor had said I should not use it. Why? What did Dr. Chen have to do with any of this? I kept reading, piecing together the story from scattered entries. The research team had discovered something beneath the jungle floor while doing initial site surveys. A structure, buried deep in the earth, made of a material that should not exist. They had excavated carefully, bringing in specialists, documenting everything, and then they had opened it. Day 221. I finally understand what happened to the original team. They did not request extraction because of equipment failures. They requested it because they opened the chamber at the bottom of the ruins and something came out. Not a physical thing, more like an idea, a presence. It infected the station like a disease, warping space and time around itself. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The jungle had already trapped them. 6 researchers went in for extraction. Only 3 made it to the helicopter. And according to the pilot's report, all 3 had the same face. My hands trembled as I turned to the next entry. Day 234. I have been thinking about what it means to be watched, not just observed, but truly seen. The thing in the ruins, it does not just watch us, it studies us, it learns us, and then it recreates us, over and over, trying to understand what we are. Every loop is an experiment. Every death is data. We are not prisoners. We are specimens. I set the journal down and stared at the terminal screen. The data scrolling past was not environmental readings. Not really. I had assumed that is what it was because that is what it looked like, what I expected to see. But now, looking closer, I could see that the numbers did not make sense. Temperature readings that fluctuated wildly within seconds. Humidity percentages over 100. Timestamps that jumped forward and backward randomly. It was not measuring the environment. It was measuring me, tracking my movements, my biometrics, my reactions. The equipment was not transmitting data to a satellite. It was transmitting data to something much closer, something right beneath my feet. I needed to get back to the basement, not because I wanted to, but because that is where the answers were. That is where the original structure was. And if there was any way to break the loop, it would be down there. I left the operations building and crossed to the laboratory in the dying light. The sun was setting fast, painting the jungle in shades of red and gold. Soon it would be dark, and I did not want to be outside when that happened. The basement hatch stood open. I had sealed it. I was certain I had sealed it. But now it gaped like a mouth, and the ladder descended into darkness below. I clicked on my flashlight and started down for the second time. The bodies were gone. All of them. The 7 corpses that had been arranged throughout the basement had vanished, leaving only drag marks in the dust on the floor. The marks led deeper into the basement, past the chain link barriers, toward a section I had not explored during my first panicked visit. I followed them, my flashlight beam dancing across concrete walls and rusted metal. The drag marks converged at a doorway cut into the far wall, a rough opening that looked like it had been jackhammered through the concrete. Beyond it, I could see stone. Ancient stone, covered in symbols that hurt to look at, that seemed to writhe and shift in the beam of my light. The ruins. I stepped through the doorway and immediately felt the temperature drop another 20 degrees. My breath plumed in the air, and frost began to form on the stone walls around me. The corridor sloped downward, deeper into the earth, following a path that spiraled like a nautilus shell. The symbols on the walls grew more complex as I descended. At first, they looked like abstract geometric shapes, but the deeper I went, the more they resembled something. Not writing, exactly. More like diagrams, instructions, or warnings. I lost track of how long I walked. My watch had stopped working, the hands frozen at 11:47 p.m., the same time the terminal always displayed. The corridor seemed to go on forever, spiraling down and down into impossible depths. I should have been miles below the surface by now. Should have hit the water table or the bedrock or something. But the corridor just kept going. Finally, it opened into a chamber. The space was vast, bigger than it had any right to be. The walls curved up and away into darkness beyond the reach of my flashlight. In the center of the chamber stood a structure that made my brain ache to look at. It was roughly pyramidal, but the angles were wrong. The surfaces seemed to intersect in ways that violated three-dimensional space, and the whole thing appeared to be rotating slowly, even though nothing was moving. Around the base of the structure sat my bodies, all 7 of them, arranged in a circle, all facing inward. But they were not alone. There were others, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, other researchers I assumed from other times, other loops, all dead, all watching the impossible structure with empty eyes. And in front of the structure, standing with its back to me, was the figure, the thing that wore my face. It turned when it heard my footsteps, and I saw that it was not alone either. There were 3 more of them, all identical, all me, all standing in formation like an honor guard. "You made it," they said in unison, 4 voices speaking my words in perfect synchronization. "We were not sure you would. Some versions of us never come down here. They die upstairs, in the residential building, or trying to escape into the jungle. But you are curious. That is why we made it this far. What are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "We are you," they replied. "We are every version of you that the structure has created. Every iteration, every loop, every failed escape attempt. We are the data." One of them stepped forward, and I could see that its face was subtly different from the others. Older, more weathered. "I am the first," it said. "I arrived 6 months ago by your timeline, or maybe it was 6 years ago. Time does not work correctly here. The structure studies temporal possibility. It creates branches, alternatives, variations. You are one branch. I am another. They are others." The figure gestured to the circle of corpses. "Those are the branches that failed, the iterations that could not survive. But we continue, we observe, we record, we feed data to the structure, and it learns." "Learns what?" I demanded. "Humanity," all 4 figures said together. "The structure is a library, a repository. It was created by something old, something that existed before humans, to catalog every possible variation of intelligent life it encounters. When the first research team opened the chamber, it activated. It began its study, and it will not stop until it has documented every possible version of every person who enters its sphere of influence." I felt my legs weaken. "How do I stop it?" The figures tilted their heads in unison, a gesture I recognized as my own expression of confusion. "Stop it? Why would you want to stop it? This is the most important thing you will ever do. You are contributing to a record that will outlast humanity. Long after your species is gone, this library will remain, preserving every choice you could have made, every path you could have taken." "I do not care about being preserved," I said, my voice rising. "I want to leave. I want to go home." The first figure smiled sadly. "There is no home anymore. There is only here. The moment you crossed the perimeter of the compound, you became part of the study. Your timeline branched. The you that exists outside still lives, still works for Dr. Holloway, still thinks you are on a research expedition. But you, this version of you, you are here now. This is your reality. That is impossible. Is it? All four figures spoke again. Then explain the journal. Explain the bodies. Explain how every path leads back here. The structure does not trap you physically. It traps you causally. Every decision you make, every action you take, is calculated and redirected to serve the study. You cannot escape, because escape is not a variable the structure needs to explore. It has already documented what happens when you escape. In other timelines, other branches, you made it out. This is not one of those branches. I raised the machete, my hands shaking. I will destroy it. I will smash that thing to pieces. The figures did not move, did not react with alarm. They just watched me with flat, emotionless eyes. You can try, the first figure said. Version 43 tried that. He is sitting over there. It pointed to one of the corpses, a version of me with a shattered skull and a bloody machete still clutched in one hand. Version 87 tried to burn it down. Version 109 tried explosives. The structure cannot be damaged. It exists slightly outside of normal spacetime. Your actions pass through it like shadows. I charged anyway. I ran at the impossible pyramid, machete raised, and swung with all my strength at its surface. The blade passed through the structure without resistance, and my momentum carried me forward. I stumbled, fell, and landed hard on the stone floor on the other side. When I looked back, the structure was unchanged, still rotating slowly, still radiating that sense of wrongness that made my teeth ache. The figures watched me impassively. "Are you finished?" they asked. I pushed myself to my feet, my shoulder throbbing from the fall. Think, Austin, think. There had to be a way out. There always was. The journal mentioned shutting down the terminal, but that had not worked. It mentioned escaping into the jungle, but every path led back. What else? What was I missing? Then, I remembered something from the journal. The first entry I had read, the one that talked about understanding the pattern. I have stopped trying to count the loops. Every time I think I understand the pattern, it changes. The pattern changes. You said the structure creates branches, I said slowly, working through the logic. Variations. Different versions of me making different choices. Yes, but if that is true, then there must be a version of me that found a way out. A version that broke the loop. The figures exchanged glances. The first moment of uncertainty I had seen from them. No, the first one said. We would know. We are connected to the structure. We would have access to that data. Unless that version never interacted with you, I countered. Unless that version found a way to avoid becoming part of the study. A way to exist outside the structure's observation. I thought back to everything I had experienced. The figure in the control room. The voice in the hallway. The reflection in the mirror. Every encounter had been designed to provoke a reaction, to generate data. Fear, confusion, desperation. The structure fed on my responses, but what if I stopped responding? The journal had mentioned seeing duplicates in reflections and photographs, versions of me that existed in parallel. What if those were not duplicates at all? What if they were real versions of me from other branches, visible in moments when the barriers between timelines grew thin? The mirror, I said aloud, in the residential building, the one that lagged. What about it? The figures asked. It was not a reflection. It was another branch. Another version of me that was slightly out of sync with this timeline. The figures stepped closer, their expressions sharpening with interest. Interesting theory. But irrelevant. Even if you could somehow transfer your consciousness to another branch, you would still be within the study. There is no escape. But I was not trying to escape. Not anymore. I was trying to understand. And in understanding, I might find something the structure had not anticipated. I turned and ran back up the spiral corridor, leaving the figures and the impossible structure behind. I could hear them calling after me, 4 voices in harmony, but I did not stop. I climbed the ladder out of the basement, crossed the compound, and entered the residential building. The common area was empty. The mirrors reflected normal things, but I stood in front of the one above the kitchenette, the one that had shown me a lagging reflection, and I waited. Minutes passed. The light faded outside as night fell. And then, Just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, I saw it. A flicker, a slight delay in the reflection's movement. "I see you," I whispered to the mirror. The reflection stopped moving. It stood perfectly still, even as I shifted my weight and adjusted my stance. And then, slowly, it smiled. I smiled back. The reflection reached up and pressed its hand against the glass from its side. I did the same from mine, matching its position exactly. Our palms met, separated by the barrier of the mirror, and I felt something shift. A vertigo, a sense of falling sideways through space that was not space. The residential building flickered. For just a moment, I saw two versions of it overlaid on each other. In one, I stood in front of the mirror in the gathering darkness. In the other, I stood in the same spot but in full daylight, and the room was slightly different, cleaner, less decayed. I pushed against the glass, willing myself toward that other version, that other branch. The structure wanted to study me, wanted to document every variation, but it had created too many branches, too many versions, and in doing so, it had created pathways between them, cracks in its own system. The mirror rippled like water. My hand sank into it, through it, and the reflection grabbed my wrist and pulled. I fell through the mirror into another version of the residential building. This one was brighter, newer, as if the abandonment had happened only recently instead of 15 years ago. I stumbled and caught myself on the coffee table, gasping for air. The newspaper was there, folded open to the weather page, but when I looked at the date, it read November 17th, 2009, Extraction Day, and the margins were blank. No notations. No list of Austins arriving at 2:31 p.m. I grabbed a pen and wrote, "Arrived through mirror, Austin, September 2nd. A sound behind me made me turn. A door was opening, the one that led to the bedrooms. A figure stepped out, and my heart nearly stopped. It was a woman, middle-aged, wearing a research uniform. She stared at me in shock, her eyes going wide. "Who are you?" she demanded. "How did you get in here?" "My name is Austin," I said, my voice shaking. "I am from another timeline, I think." "Dr. Holloway," she said, "Patricia Holloway, and you need to start making sense right now, or I am calling for security." "Dr. Holloway?" "My supervisor, but younger, maybe 15 years younger." This was not just another branch of my timeline. This was a different point in time altogether. I had fallen through the mirror into 2009, into the original abandonment. "You need to listen to me," I said urgently. "You are about to request an extraction. You are going to leave this place and never come back. But you have to understand what is happening here. The structure beneath the laboratory building, it is creating temporal loops. It is trapping people, studying them across multiple timelines. If you do not shut it down properly, it will keep going. It will trap everyone who comes here." "Doctor," Holloway stared at me like I had lost my mind. "The structure is sealed. We are not going anywhere near it again after what happened to Dr. Richardson." "What happened to Dr. Richardson?" "He went down into the ruins 3 days ago to document the symbols. When he came back up, there were 2 of him. Identical. They both claimed to be the real Richardson. Both had the same memories, same personality. We had to sedate both of them. They are in the medical bay right now." She shook her head. "We are leaving tomorrow morning. The company is shutting this project down." "It will not matter," I said. "The structure will keep running. It will keep creating branches, keep trapping people. You have to destroy the terminal in the operations building. Cut the power completely. Collapse the entrance to the ruins. We already tried cutting the power. It did not work. The equipment keeps running on its own. Then you need to destroy the structure itself." Dr. Holloway laughed bitterly. "We tried that too. Nothing we do affects it. Bullets pass through it. Fire does not touch it. It is like trying to destroy a mirage." I slumped into a chair, defeat washing over me. If the original team could not destroy it, what chance did I have? "There has to be a way," I muttered. "There has to be something." Dr. Holloway studied me for a long moment. "You said you came through a mirror. From another timeline, which means the structure is still active in your time, which means we failed to stop it." "Yes, And you have been trapped here, in some kind of loop. Yes. She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said, "What if we are asking the wrong question? We have been trying to destroy the structure or shut it down. But what if the answer is to complete its function?" "What do you mean?" "It is a library, right? A repository for documenting intelligent life. What if it keeps running because its study is incomplete? What if we give it what it wants?" I shook my head. "It wants to document every possible variation of every person who enters. That is infinite. It could never be complete. Unless we limit the variables," Dr. Holloway said, her eyes lighting up with sudden inspiration. "What if we give it a complete data set for just one person? Document every possible choice, every possible path, and compress it into a single timeline. Not infinite variations, but a comprehensive singular record. How would we even do that?" "The mirrors," she said. "You came through a mirror. The structure creates branches, and the mirrors show connections between them. What if we could use that? Merge the branches instead of creating new ones?" It was insane, but it was also the first idea that felt like it might actually work. "I would need to find every version of me," I said slowly. "Every branch where I made a different choice. And somehow bring them all back together into one timeline." "Not just bring them together, Doctor," Holloway corrected. "You would need to integrate them. Make all those choices, all those variations, part of a single consciousness. Give the structure a complete record of Austin, not Austin multiplied by infinity." I stood up and walked to the mirror above the table. My reflection looked back at me, perfectly synchronized now, but I could feel them out there. Other versions of me, making other choices in other branches. The one who destroyed the terminal, the one who burned the compound, the one who died in the basement, the one who never came here at all. They were all me, and I was all of them. "How do I do it?" I asked. Dr. Holloway pulled a small device from her pocket, something that looked like a modified GPS unit. "This measures temporal displacement. We have been using it to track the anomalies around the compound. If you can find the focal points, the places where multiple timelines intersect, you should be able to access other branches." She handed it to me, and I watched the screen flicker to life. It showed the compound layout with several bright spots marking areas of high temporal activity: the mirrors in the residential building, the control room terminal, the basement entrance, and one massive concentration directly over the structure itself. "You will need to visit each focal point, Doctor," Holloway explained. "At each one, you will find another version of yourself, another branch. You will need to merge with them, integrate their memories and experiences. It will not be pleasant." "What happens if I succeed?" "If you succeed, the structure will have its complete record. It should deactivate, releasing everyone trapped in the loops. You will return to a singular timeline." "And if I fail?" Dr. Holloway did not answer. She did not need to. I looked at the device in my hand, then back at the mirror. "I need to start now, before I lose my nerve." "One more thing," Dr. Holloway said. "In my timeline, in 2009, you do not exist yet. You have not been hired by the company, have not been sent here, which means when you merge the branches, you might erase this conversation. I might not remember any of this. Will that be a problem?" She smiled sadly. "I suppose we will find out. Good luck, Austin. And if you do make it back to a singular timeline, do not come back here. Whatever you do not let the company send anyone else to this place." I nodded and turned back to the mirror. I pressed my hand against the glass, and this time I focused on the sensation, the feeling of falling sideways through space. The device in my other hand beeped softly, confirming high temporal activity. The mirror rippled. I pushed through. I emerged in another version of the compound, this one burning. Flames consumed the residential building, smoke pouring into the night sky. A figure stood in the courtyard, watching the fire with a grim expression. It was me, covered in soot, holding an empty gas can. "Version 87, I said, remembering what the figures in the basement had told me. The other me turned, unsurprised. "You are here to merge the branches. How did you know?" "Because I am you. Because we are the same person making different choices. I chose to burn it down. You chose to understand it. Now we need to be one person who did both." He walked toward me, and as he got closer, I could see the weariness in his eyes, the hopelessness. He had tried to destroy the compound, thinking that would break the loop, but he was still here, still trapped. "It hurts," he said quietly. "The merging. You are about to experience everything I experienced, every choice I made, every moment of despair. Are you ready for that?" I was not ready. I would never be ready. But I nodded anyway. He reached out and took my hand. The moment we touched, I felt his memories flood into me. Days of planning, stealing fuel from the laboratory building, waiting for nightfall, the satisfaction of watching the flames spread, followed quickly by the crushing realization that it changed nothing. The compound still stood in other branches. The loop still continued. The memories integrated, became mine, and suddenly I could remember both trying to burn the compound and trying to understand it. Two sets of experiences, two paths, existing simultaneously in my mind. The other me smiled faintly. One down. How many more? I checked the device. The readings showed the focal points more clearly now, and I could see faint traces connecting them, a web of intersecting timelines. "A lot," I said. "Maybe dozens. Then we better get started." But he was not separate from me anymore. We were one person now, carrying both sets of memories. I looked down at my hands and saw that I was alone in the burning courtyard, the flames casting dancing shadows across the compound. I moved to the next focal point, the control room terminal. When I stepped inside the operations building, I found another version of myself seated at the terminal, frantically typing commands. This one was trying to hack the system, to find some software backdoor that would shut everything down. "It does not work," I told him. He looked up, and I saw the dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hands from too many sleepless nights. "I know," he said. "I have tried every combination, every exploit. The system does not have vulnerabilities. It is not really a computer system at all. It is just an interface. I need to merge with you." He laughed, a hollow sound. "You are collecting us, making yourself whole. Did Dr. Holloway tell you about this?" "How did you know about Dr. Holloway?" "Because I met her too. In my branch, in my version of events. She told me the same thing. Merge the branches, complete the record. I have been here for months, trying to find all the other versions. I thought if I could access the system, I could locate them more easily." He stood up from the terminal. "Take what I learned. Maybe it will help." We merged, and I inherited his technical knowledge, his understanding of the system's architecture. I could now remember both burning the compound and hacking the terminal. The weight of memories was growing heavier, and I felt my sense of self starting to fragment under the pressure. How many more versions were there? How many choices had I made across how many branches? The device showed dozens of focal points, but as I looked closer, I could see that many of them were fading, their temporal signatures weakening. The branches were already starting to collapse, drawn together by my merging with the variations. Each time I integrated another version, it created a ripple effect, pulling nearby branches into alignment. I moved through the compound like a ghost, visiting each focal point and merging with the version of myself I found there. The one who died in the basement, killed by despair and starvation. The one who made it to the river, but found himself walking back to the compound. The one who barricaded himself in the residential building and went mad from isolation. The one who tried to document everything, filling journals with observations and theories. Each merger was agony. Each set of memories added weight, added experiences of fear and failure and hopelessness. I began to lose track of which memories were from which branch, which choices were originally mine and which were inherited from other versions. But I kept going. The device led me to progressively stranger focal points. A spot in the jungle where a version of me had died from a snake bite. A place beside the river where a version of me had drowned trying to swim to freedom. Even a spot in the medical bay where a version of me had tried to perform surgery on himself to remove a tracking device he believed was implanted in his arm. With each merger, I became more complete and more fractured. I was one person carrying the experiences of dozens. I had made every choice, walked every path, died every death. I was the sum of all possible Austins who had entered Outpost Viridian. Finally, the device showed only one focal point remaining. the massive concentration directly above the structure in the basement. I descended the ladder one last time, my body moving on autopilot while my fractured mind tried to hold itself together. The basement was crowded now with all the bodies from all the branches, hundreds of corpses in various states of decay. But they were starting to fade, becoming translucent as the timelines collapsed into singularity. The structure waited in its chamber, still rotating, still radiating wrongness. And standing in front of it were the 4 figures, the ones who claimed to be me. "You did it," they said in unison. "You collected all the branches. You integrated all the variations. You are complete." "Almost," I managed to say, my voice raw from all the voices I now carried. "I still need to merge with you." The figures looked at each other. "Us? We are not variations. We are observers. We are what happens when a version of you accepts the role and becomes part of the structure's documentation process." "You are still me," I insisted. "You are what I could become if I gave up." The possibility of surrender. They were silent for a long moment. Then the first figure, the oldest one, stepped forward. "If you merge with us, you will understand the structure completely. You will see what it sees, know what it knows." "Are you prepared for that?" I was not prepared. I would never be prepared. But I had come this far. The figure took my hand, and I felt the final merger begin. This one was different from the others. Instead of adding memories, it added perspective. I suddenly saw myself from outside, saw all the Austins across all the branches making all their choices. I saw the structure not as a prison but as an archive, a record of human complexity created by something ancient and utterly non-human. I saw the beings who had built it, millennia ago, things that existed in dimensions we could barely perceive. They had created the library not out of malice, but out of curiosity, a desire to understand the strange, temporally linear beings they had encountered. And I saw the truth that the structure had learned from studying me across all those branches. Humans were not meant to see themselves so completely. We needed mystery, needed the unknown paths not taken. Complete self-knowledge was a form of death, but I also saw the key to shutting it all down. The structure would release me if I gave it what it wanted. Not infinite documentation, but a perfect singular record. One Austin who had experienced everything, made every choice, become every variation. I was that Austin now. I turned to face the structure and spoke to it directly, knowing it would hear me. "I am complete. I have experienced every possible variation. You have your record. Release the loop." The structure's rotation slowed. The wrongness in its angles began to shift, becoming less alien, more comprehensible. And then, with a sound like reality exhaling, it stopped. The chamber flooded with light, not the cold blue glow of the terminal or the harsh white of the fluorescence, but warm golden sunlight streaming down from above. I looked up and saw that the ceiling of the chamber had opened, revealing the jungle canopy and the sky beyond. The bodies around me faded completely, becoming nothing more than impressions in the dust. The figures released my hand and bowed their heads, their forms dissolving into particles of light that drifted upward like reverse rain. I was alone in the chamber with the silent structure. No, not quite alone. I carried dozens of versions of myself within me now, all their memories and experiences integrated into a singular consciousness. I was everyone I could have been, all at once. I climbed back up through the basement, through the laboratory building, and out into the courtyard. The sun was rising, painting the compound in warm colors. My watch had started working again, showing 6:47 a.m., and the date read September 3rd. Only one day had passed since I arrived, despite the subjective weeks I had experienced across all the branches. The satellite phone in my pack chirped with an incoming message. I pulled it out and saw a text from Dr. Holloway. "Extraction helicopter will arrive at your location at 0900 hours. Confirm status." I typed back, "Status confirmed. Ready for extraction." While I waited for the helicopter, I walked through the compound one last time. The operations building stood quiet, its terminal dark. The residential building looked worn but ordinary, no strange reflections in the mirrors. The laboratory building was sealed tight, the basement hatch locked. It was just an abandoned research station, nothing more. The helicopter arrived precisely at 9 a.m., its rotors beating the air above the compound. As I climbed aboard and strapped in, I looked back at Outpost Viridian one last time. It looked small from the air, just a tiny clearing in an ocean of green, already being swallowed by the jungle. The pilot handed me a headset. "You find what you were looking for?" he asked in accented English. "Yes," I said. "And some things I was not looking for." The flight back to Manaus took 3 hours, then another day of travel back to Portland. Throughout the journey, I tried to process what had happened, tried to reconcile the dozens of sets of memories I now carried. I could remember burning the compound and hacking the terminal and dying in the basement and 100 other things that had happened in branches that no longer existed. But I also carried something else, the structure's understanding, its perspective on humanity. We were not specimens to it, not test subjects. We were art, living sculptures that changed themselves constantly, making choices and following paths that created beauty in their complexity. The structure had documented me completely, not to trap me, but to preserve that beauty, to save a perfect record of human choice and consequence in case humanity ever disappeared. When I finally walked into Dr. Holloway's office back in Portland, she looked up from her desk and smiled. "Austin, you made it back. How did the mission go?" She did not remember. Of course she did not. The conversation we had in 2009 had happened in a branch that no longer existed. In this timeline, the singular timeline, Dr. Holloway had never gone to Outpost Viridian. The company had abandoned the project before she got involved. "It was educational," I said carefully, "but I need to recommend that we never send anyone back there. The site should be permanently decommissioned." "That is already the plan," she said, pulling out a folder. "The Brazilian government is reclaiming the land for a national park. The station will be dismantled next month." She paused. "Did you find out what was transmitting?" "Equipment malfunction," I lied. "Just some solar panels and a backup battery that kept one terminal running. I shut it down." She nodded, satisfied with the explanation. "Good. I know that was a rough assignment. Take the rest of the week off. You earned it." I left her office and went home to my apartment in Northwest Portland. It looked exactly as I had left it, which felt strange after the subjective time I had spent in the jungle. I showered, changed into clean clothes, and tried to sleep. But I kept dreaming of the structure, of all my other selves, of the choices I had made and not made, the paths I had walked and not walked. They were part of me now, as real as any memory from this singular timeline. In the weeks that followed, I tried to return to normal life. I went back to work, hung out with friends, pretended everything was fine, but I was fundamentally changed. I could see the branches now, the paths people did not take. When a colleague hesitated at a decision, I could almost see the ghost of an alternate version making a different choice. When I walked down a street, I felt the weight of all the versions of me who had walked different streets. I started writing it all down, not for a report or a scientific paper, just to preserve what I had learned, what I had become. This narration, this account you have been listening to, is the result. If you have watched this far, if you have heard my entire story, I want to thank you. Truly. It means everything that someone knows what happened out there, that this experience was witnessed and remembered. Please, hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment telling me I am not alone in experiencing things that should not be possible. Because here is the truth I learned in Outpost Viridian. We are all walking through branches every day, making choices that create infinite variations of ourselves. Most of the time, we do not notice. We collapse the branches unconsciously, choosing one path and letting the others fade into might have been. But sometimes, in certain places where reality is thin, those branches become visible. We catch glimpses of our other selves, the versions who made different choices. And if we are unlucky enough, or curious enough, we might find ourselves trapped between branches, unable to collapse back into singularity. That is what the structure taught me. We are beings of choice, and choice creates branches. But we are meant to collapse those branches, to live in a singular flowing timeline. Complete self-knowledge, seeing all the paths at once, is not enlightenment. It is fragmentation. I still carry all those versions of me. The one who burned the compound, the one who died alone, the one who gave up. They whisper sometimes, late at night, reminding me of roads not taken. Sometimes I catch my reflection moving just slightly out of sync, and I know that somewhere in the quantum foam of possibility, another version of me is making a different choice. 3 months after I returned, I received a package at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a small object wrapped in cloth, a fragment of the structure. Smooth, dark, impossible to focus on directly, and a note in handwriting I recognized as my own, though I never wrote it. The structure is gone, but pieces remain. The Brazilian government found 17 researchers in the compound when they arrived to dismantle it. All alive, all claiming to be the only one. They are being held in a medical facility outside Manaus, trying to determine which ones are real. But they are all real, Austin. That is what you need to understand. We collapsed the main loop, but we created 17 new branches in the process. 17 timelines where a different version of you made it out. This is one of them. I am writing this from another. The structure did not trap us. It showed us the truth. We are not singular beings. We are multiplicities. Every moment, every choice, we split into branches. Most of them are too small to notice, quantum uncertainties that resolve immediately. But sometimes, the branches grow large enough to see, large enough to touch. Keep the fragment. It might help you navigate what comes next. I burned the note but kept the fragment. I do not know why. Maybe because it is the only proof I have that any of it was real. Maybe because some part of me, some integrated aspect from one of those other branches, knows I might need it. Last week, Dr. Holloway called me into her office again. She looked older, more tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying secrets. I need to tell you something, she said, closing the door behind me. And you are not going to like it. My stomach dropped. What? I remember, she said quietly. Not all of it, just fragments, like half-remembered dreams. But I remember a younger version of myself in the compound in 2009. I remember a man who came through a mirror. I remember telling him how to merge the branches. That is impossible. That branch collapsed. You should not. I know. But I do remember. And if I remember, that means the timeline is not as stable as we thought. The branches are bleeding through. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. We have been monitoring the satellite data from that region. The transmissions started again 2 weeks ago, stronger than before. And this time, they are not coming from the compound. I opened the folder. Inside were satellite images of the jungle, marked with coordinates. The transmission source was about 20 miles south of Outpost Viridian, in an area that showed no signs of human presence. There is another structure, Dr. Holloway said. Or maybe it is the same one, appearing in a different location. We do not understand the mechanism, but it is active, and it is creating the same temporal anomalies. You want me to go back? No. God, no. I would never send you back there. She looked at me with something like sympathy. But I think you are going to go anyway, because you are the only one who understands what is happening. You are the only one who has survived integrating the branches. She was right. I knew she was right. Some part of me, some version from some collapsed branch, had already decided. I could feel the pull of it, the structure calling to me across the miles. It wanted to be witnessed again, documented, understood. When do I leave? I asked. Dr. Holloway shook her head. Austin, you do not have to do this. We can seal the area, prevent anyone from going near it. It will not matter. If the structure wants observers, it will bring them. Better that it is someone who knows what they are walking into. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. There is a charter leaving Manaus on Friday. I will make the arrangements. As I left her office, I caught my reflection in the glass door. For just a moment, I saw another version of me standing on the other side. Older, more weathered, scarred in ways I am not scarred. And it was smiling that small, knowing smile. It waved at me. Slowly, deliberately, I waved back. Because here is the final truth, the one I am still learning to accept. I did not escape Outpost Viridian. None of my versions did. We just learned to navigate the branches. We learned to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously, collapsing and expanding as needed. The Austin who came back to Portland is real. But so is the Austin who is still in the compound, still merging with variations. And so is the Austin who never went at all, who turned down Dr. Holloway's original offer and lived a normal life. We are all real, all simultaneous, all true. And now, if you have made it to the end of this account, you understand why I needed to share it, why I needed witnesses. Because the structure taught me that consciousness requires observation. We do not truly exist until we are witnessed by another. So thank you for witnessing me. Thank you for collapsing my wave function into something real and documented. And if you ever find yourself in a place where the paths branch visibly, where you can see your other selves making different choices, remember this. Do not try to merge them all. Do not seek complete self-knowledge. Let some branches remain unexplored. Let some versions of yourself exist only in possibility. That is how we stay human. That is how we stay sane. I am Austin, and I exist in 17 confirmed branches, maybe more. I am 28 years old, or I am 32, or I am dead, or I am still walking through that jungle trying to find my way out. I am all of these things, and I am going back to the Amazon next week. If you do not hear from me again, please remember this story, share it, keep it alive, because somewhere, in some branch, some version of me will need to know that the story was told, that someone was watching, that someone saw.